Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Ches Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. The Gemara had previously brought Shmuel, who taught us various remedies for eye ailments. And he said the best of all is putting cold water in the eye in the morning and washing one's hands and feet with hot water at night. The Gemara then brought a Brisa that gave the same exact medical advice in the name of Rabbi Muna b'shem Rabbi Yehuda. And he said as follows: Toiva tipas tzoinin shacharis, v'richisas yadayim v'raglayim bechamin arvis, mikol kilorin sheba oilam. The Brisa now continues in the name of Rabbi Muna b'shem Rabbi Yehuda, but this time it discusses now when a person did not yet wash negel vaser in the morning, and he has ruach ro, that is shora, on his hands, and he touches various orifices in his body. He's then going to put them in danger, and therefore he says, it's such a dangerous thing that he can blind the eye, that better that his hand be cut off. Or if he then puts his hand in his nose, his finger in his nose, or in his mouth, or in his ear, or in the place where he just did bloodletting, Yad la'ama tikatzes, or on the orifice of the ama. Yad lepi tabas tikatzes, or on the orifice in the backside. Yad legigis tikatzes. We're on the top of Kuf Tes Amud Aleph, and it says even when a person then puts his hand on a barrel of beer, that also will then have deleterious, dangerous types of effect on not only the beer, but those who will drink it. The Brisa continues, Yad mesame, the yad that touches the eye will blind it. Yad mechareshes, or touches the ear, will then cause it, the inside of the ear will cause it to become deaf. Yad ma'ale polyphois, and also when touches one's nose and in one's mouth, he will then cause an odor to emanate from those places. Now Rashi over here, in the 3rd line, tells us that some of these things that are quoted are not quoted for their sake of touching just the orifice alone. Says Rashi in Yomi Masechet Male Folivois, the odor that will emanate from the nose and the mouth, that will then result when one touches those places without having had washed negel vaser. V'linira, says Rashi in continuation, the yad la'am olav le'inyin shacharis nokat lo. When we talk about yad li'ama, he says, although it states over here in this brisa, yad la'ama tikotzet, he says it's not dafka in talking about when person just touches the orifice. Ela mishum demevi lidei keri. Rather, he says that the reason why yad li'ama is tikotzet is because it will mechamem the person, and that will then ultimately, very often, bring to a shichva zer levatola. And therefore he quotes the Mishnah in Nida over Maseches Nida Amrinon Bo Tikotzets Mishum Hai Taima. For that reason it says Yad La'ama Tikotzets. Umishum de Tanya Bonami Latuso de Tikotzets Tanya Nami Gabe Hanach. Since this Bryce is quoting various curses for one who touches things with his hands, therefore it includes this, as Rashi, and therefore it mentions Yad La'ama Tikotzets. But it's lav dafka talking about when one touches only the orifice. V'chein yad lefi hatabas lemashmesh bo todir meviyoso lidei tachtoinim. Similarly, he says when a person touches the backside orifice, that itself, if he does that, that will cause him to then have hemorrhoids. Back in the Gemara, the 2nd line now quotes another brisa. Tanya, Rabbi Nasan Oimer, Bascharin hizu umakpedes ad sheyirchoit yodav gimel pamim. This ruach ra that we're talking about is a bascharin. It's somewhat free, and his makpedes is particular, that a person should wash his hands 3 times. That means begin with his right hand, then going to the left hand and back to the right hand and left hand, and right hand and left hand 3 times each. Seiruk and dafka in that order. Then he will then remove the ruach ro. Rabbi Yochanan puch ma'avir bas melech. Eye makeup will then remove this ruach ro called bas melech, upoisek es hadim, which will then stop the eyes from tearing, umar beser be'afapoim, and will also then cause the hair to grow properly on the eyelids. Tani nami hochi, there's also a brisa to this effect. Rabbi Yossi omer puch ma'avir bes melech upoisek es hadimo umar beseyar be'afapoim. Says Gemara weiter, ve'omar mar ukvo amar Shmuel, olin ein bohem mishum refuah. Shmuel, again, who is a physician, a doctor, tells us that when a person eats alin, you should know that it's not going to have a medicinal, helpful effect on the eyes. Rav Yosef kuzbarta ein ba mishum refuah. Coriander, says Rav Yosef, also does not have healing elements. Rav Sheshes kishus ein bohem mishum refuah. And Rav Sheshes now adds that kishus, which is the hops of the barley, that also does not have healing effects on the eye. Rav Yosef kuzbarta afila ledidi kashali. Rav Yosef, who just said that kuzbarta, which is coriander, kuzbara, that he said before does not have healing elements for the eye, and he now says that even for him it is kashali, meaning to say even he who is blind, it still caused him pain in his eyes. Rav Sheshes, who was also blind, he says gargira afila didi ma'ali. On the other hand, he says gargiri, he says this, which is a certain type of plant, seed, that also tastes like mustard. This, he said, does have a positive refuah, medicinal effect to heal the eyes. Mar Ukva Amar Shmuel. Mar Ukva said the name of Shmuel. Again, Shmuel was the doctor. Mar Ukva was Meshamish him. He said, Kolmine Kishus Sharu. Because Shmuel, who said before that Kishus, before, is indeed something that does not have a healing effect on the eyes, so therefore it's permitted to be eaten on Shabbos. Lebar mitruza, with the exception of mitruza, because the mitruza, this type of kishus, this itself is something that only people who are ill will eat, and therefore it's muchach. It's clear that he's eating so for medicinal purpose, and therefore it's aser. Says the Gemara Vayter Amar Rav Chisda, Shrika Tavia Shari. A person who bastes oil and egg on a roast that was taken out of the oven and now has cooled off, he said is mutter. Why would we think that it's aser? Because it might appear to be b'mesakein. And he says, no, it's not in Isser D'Rabbanan, it's mutter l'chatchila. Piapue bei aser. However, he says that when one beats eggs in a bowl, that is also because that appears that a person then is going to then put it into a pot or a pan and then cook with it. And therefore, the Rabbanan said that is also according to Rav Chisda. The visu di zeiri avda le lechia bar ashi v'loy ochel. It says the wife of Rav Zeiri, she made his Talmid Rav Chia bar Ashi the shrika tatavia, and he didn't eat it. She says to him now, Amra le l'raboch avdi le v'ochel. I made this same thing for your Rebbe, my husband Zeiri, v'at loy ochalt, and he ate it and you didn't eat. Zeiri, the Gemara explains that her husband Zeiri has his own reasoning. The reason why he ate is as follows: the Omar Zeiri noisin odem yayin solul umayin slulin letoich hamishmeres b'Shabbos ve'eno choishes. A person can take clear wine or clear water and put it on a strainer on Shabbos and not be concerned. In other words, it's muter lechatchila to do that, because after all, it doesn't have any additional tikkun because he already is solul. So therefore, it's not significant if it makes it a little bit more solul, even more clear. Alma kiven the mishtati hochi la midika avid. Since that a person would drink it in this way before he even strains it, because it's yayin solul and mayin solulim, therefore he didn't do anything when he puts it in the strainer. Hochanami kiven the mischil hochi la midika avid. So too over here, when a person will then eat this shrika tavia, when it's basted on the roast, since he would eat the roast even without that, so therefore that additional basting on the roast should not then provide a tikkun that should become osir on Shabbos. Says the Gemara weiter, v'omar mar ukvo, mi shenotvo yodoi or ragloi, tzoim so b'yayim ve'eno choshev. A person who banged his hand or his foot can reduce the swelling with wine, and it's not a problem, meaning you can do so lichatchila on Shabbos. Iboy luhu. The Gemara now asks, what about challah, meaning vinegar? Challah mai, what's the din? Maybe challah is different because challah, vinegar, can then harden the skin and prevent the swelling more easily, and therefore for refuah. Omer Rav Hillel, Rav Ashi, ki havina be Rav Kahana Amre, they said in the Beis Medrash of Kahana, challah loy. Although you can use wine, but challah, vinegar not. Omar Rove, v'hani b'nei mechuza, kivan de mefanki, afil l'chamer nami masei lahu. He said the people of b'nei mechuza, the people that lived in mechuza, they were mefanki, they were very extra sensitive, and their skin was sensitive. And therefore, putting the wine even on their skin would be a healing element, and therefore it was usher for them to do so. Ravina, ikloi lebei Rav Ashi. The Gemara tells us that Ravina came and visited Rav Ashi. Chazi didiricha le chamora agava ditkare v'yosiv kotzamis le bechala. And he saw that Rav Ashi, he was injured because a donkey trampled on his foot. And then he saw that Rav Ashi was putting vinegar on his foot in order to then reduce the swelling. Omar lei. So he turned to Rav Ashi and he said to him, Lo sover lomar doho da Omar Rav Hillel. Do you not hold with what Rav Hillel taught us, what he said? Chalaloi, that it's usher to then put vinegar on a wound as to reduce its swelling. Omar le gav hayad vegav haregel shiny. The back of one's hand, the back of one's foot is different. That's already considered to be a sakana, and therefore it's mutter. The Gemara now brings another version, Ika de Amre. Chazye de kotsamis le bechamro. He saw that he was reducing this swelling with wine. Omar le, he said to him, Lo sovar lomar lohodamar Rava. Do you not hold with what Rava said? Rava taught the following: Hani b'nei mechuzah kivim demafanki afilu chamora nami masi lahu. He's told us that even the b'nei mechuzah cannot use wine because they are so sensitive, and therefore you must be the same way. How can you be using then wine? Umar nami homefanik. So how can it be permissible to use wine to reduce the swelling? Omar le gav hayad vegav haregel shiny. The back of one's hand, the back of one's foot is different. The back of one's hand, the back of one's foot is such a serious injury, it's like an internal wound. And therefore, it's considered to be pikuach nefesh, where a person can be mechalel the Shabbos for, since pikuach nefesh is doiche Shabbos. Says the Gemara weiter, Tanu Rabbanon, we have a brisa that teaches the following: Roy chatzin b'mei grar, bathing one can do in the waters of grar, b'mei chamton, b'mei asya, uv'mei teveria. All of these different waters one may bathe on Shabbos, and it does not then have a prohibition of the Rabbanon that he's doing so for medicinal purposes of refuah. Avalo b'yam hagodol, but not. He may not bathe in the Yam HaGodol. V'lo b'mei mishra, and not in water that you soaked flax in. V'lo b'yam shel sdom, and not in the Yam HaMelach. Because of, again, if it's salting healing elements. Ask the Gemara from another brisa that seems to then contradict this. V'raminu, Roy chatzin b'mei teveria u'v'yam HaGodol. Here it says you could bathe in the Yam HaGodol. But not in the Mei Mishra, not the Yam of Stom, the Hainu, the Yam HaMelach. Ask the Gemara, Kashi Yam HaGodol, Yam HaGodol. Now we have a steer. The first brisa says that one cannot bathe in the Yam HaGodol, while the second brisa says that one can bathe in the Yam HaGodol. Answers the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Yochanan lo kasha. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not a difficulty. Because Ha Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, one is authored by Rabbi Meir, while the other one is authored by Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Gemara is going to bring a Mishnah in regards to Tahara. When a person is Tameh, so then he must immerse himself either in a mikvah or in a mayan, in a spring, in order to then retire himself. What is the difference between a mikvah and a mayan? A mikvah, in order to be valid, has to be an ashboren, which means it's still water. It can't be zoichel, it cannot be flowing water. Whereas the mayan is flowing water, and therefore a person can immerse himself in the flowing water of a mayan. The second difference is that in order for certain things, zov and the purification process of the mitzara, as well as the sprinkling of the efer hapara, requires mayim chayim, and therefore that's only from the mayan and not from the mikveh. So therefore, those are the two differences that the Mishnah is going to discuss over here. Disnan, it says in the Mishnah, Kol hayomim ki mikveh. All of the waters are like compared to a mikveh. Shenemar, ule mikveh hamayim kora yomim. Divrei Meir. Reb Meir says the fact that the pasuk compares all of the waters to yomim, therefore they're all the same. In other words, even the Yam HaGadol is like all of the other waters in regards to comparing it and being called a mikveh. And therefore, li'inyanenu, Rabbi Meir is the one who authors the second brisa, because just like in all of the other waters you can go ahead and bathe, so too when it comes to the Yam HaGadol, one is able to roichet on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yam HaGadol ki mikveh. It's only the Yam HaGadol is compared to a mikveh. V'lo ne'emar, he has a question, then when does it say yamim in the pasuk? V'lo ne'emar yam ela sheyesh bo minei yamim harbe. That which is in the pasuk, yamim, plural, refers to that there are many rivers and bodies of water that enter the Yam HaGadol. The Yam HaGadol is referring to the Atlantic Ocean. And therefore, it's referring to yamim, but it's really only the Yam HaGadol that's compared to the mikveh, whereby he makes a distinction between the Yam HaGadol and other types of waters. For example, like the Kinneret and other types of waters that do not flow into the Atlantic. And therefore, when it comes to the other waters, one may bathe on Shabbos, but when it comes to the Yam HaGadol, Rabbi Yehuda says, like the first brisa, that one is prohibited from being roichetz on Shabbos. There's a third opinion in this Mishnah as follows. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol hayamim mitarim bezoichelim. All of the bodies of water, he doesn't make a distinction between the Yam HaGadol and other bodies of water, they are like zoichelin. In other words, even though they flow, one can, mitar himself in these bodies of water. Because after all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu naturally made them flowing. And therefore, they're also then permissible to then be made to be immersed in. However, he says they're not considered to be mayim chayim, to be used for the things that require mayim chayim. U'pesulim lezovim, u'lemitzaroim, u'lekadish bahen mechatos. Ask the Gemara, after reconciling the two brisas, that the first brisa is authored by Rabbi Yehuda, while the second brisa is authored by Rabbi Meir. Maskil Rav Nachman by Yitzchok, on the top of Kuf Tes Amud Beis, Eimor de pligi le'inyan tuma v'tahara le'inyan Shabbos mishamis lehu. Granted, they're arguing in the inyan of tuma and tahara, but who says they're arguing in regards to our inyan of Shabbos? How can you then apply their argument to our inyan of Shabbos? Therefore, says the Gemara, Ela Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok loy kashya. I can reconcile the two brises as follows. Ha de ishtai, ha de lo ishtai. The brisa that says that it is osir, in other words, the first brisa, is talking about where the ishtoi, where the person went in and he remained in the water for a period of time. Whereas the second brisa that says permissible to then bathe in the Yam HaGadol is talking about where he went in and he went out. Because when he goes in and he stays in, as the first brisa says, it's also to do so because it indicates that he's doing so for refuah purposes. Whereas in the second brisa it says he just went in and then he left, he went out, that's talking about where he just merely cooled himself off. So that's permissible. Bumai ukimte lebasraisa. Which one did you then, the Gemara wants to then challenge what we just said. What did you just establish to be the second brisa, the one that says it's permissible to then bathe in the Yam HaGadol? De lo ishtoi, in the case where he did not remain inside, he went in the water and then he came out. Ask the Gemara, if that's so, de lo ishtoi, afilu me mishra nami, then even me mishra should be permissible. And yet the brisa, that second brisa, that says the Yam HaGadol is permissible, but me mishra is asur. And therefore you have to be consistent. The same way that the Yam HaGadol is talking about going in and out, and we're saying it's permissible, then it would also then mean that the case of Mei Mishra is also going in and out. And yet we have a third brisa that the Gemara now quotes that says Mei Mishra, when a person goes in and out, is permissible. The Tanya, Roichatzim b'mei Teveria, u'b'mei Mishra, u'v'yom shel Sdoim, v'afal pisha yesh lo chatatim b'rosh, even though he has sores on his head, which indicates he's doing so for medicinal purposes, still he's able to then bathe in these bodies of water, including the Mei Mishra. Uvamed dvarim mamun. When is this so? Says the Brisa, shelo nishtahe, avon nishtar aser. So the Brisa says if he doesn't remain inside, he just merely goes out, then it's permissible. So therefore, it cannot be the yishuv that we wanted to say before, because then it would be that Mei Mishra should be permissible, and that Brisa says that it's aser. Elayam agodol ayam agodol kasha. Says the Gemara to then reconcile the kasha between the first and second Brisa, where again the first Brisa says the yam agodol is aser, and the second Brisa says it's mutter to be roichit in the yam agodol. As follows: Ha biyafin sheboy ha beroin sheboy. The yishuv is that the one that says that is permissible, the second Brisa is talking about biyafin, where the water is good water, and therefore a person might go inside even for a long period of time, and he's not doing for medicinal purposes. However, haberoim, that which the part is putrid water of the Yam HaGadol, the only one that would stay in such water is referring to a person who has a need for refuah, and therefore that's also, that's referring to then the first Brisa. And now we can miyashiv also that we said before, Mei Mishra, Mei Mishra Nami Lokash. That which you said, one Brisa indicates that Mei Mishra is prohibited, while the other Brisa indicates that Mei Mishra is permissible on Shabbos. Answers the Gemara, Hadi Ishtoi, Hadi Lo Ishtoi. That which it says that is prohibited is talking about when Ishtoi, when he remains in the water. And that which is indeed permissible is when he goes in and then he leaves right away.